Take your time, do it right. We can do it, baby. Do it tonight. Take your time. So these two coons are definitely time, do it right. We can do it, baby. Can we get a mute? Okay, so these two coons right here. Peace, Donnie. Yeah, listen, all these talking points. Now, I realized that Myron Gaines, a peace FBA guys, 5:30 a.m. California. Wow. So I realized that Myron Gaines, like in tethers like Chaotic Truth, they borrowed talking points from Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder. And like the difference between Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell is that Larry Elder, when I watch his videos of him coning, he's normally reading something. Like he doesn't really know it, like these coon talking points. But Thomas Sowell, like he seems to be the author of his talk. So it seems like Thomas Sowell is the author of some of these talking points, and everybody else just repeats them and try to gain some fame. So we're gonna get into it. All right. So now I'm gonna debunk almost all their major talking points today about why systemic racism does not exist. And then, of course, when I cook Myron Gaines, he's going to try to go to these talking points. So this is their daddy. Even some left wing, I don't right wing, I don't know how you call these folks, but these black nationalist groups, they also listen to Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder, and they cherry pick data that they agree with. So they don't agree that systemic racism doesn't exist, but they will agree with Larry Elder when he says um, black marriages, the lack thereof, is the reason why we're failing, or welfare is the reason why we're failing. So they would take those talking points and agree with that. A lot of black nationalist groups. That's also false. So all that's going to be debunked. The lack of marriages, of course, a marriage, households, they make more money, the kid is more stable, but this ain't the reason why black folks are down. This is a symptom, right? So it all goes back to systemic racism because without systemic racism, hell, um, those stats that's negative for single family homes aren't as negative. So it's not a fair comparison. So you have to compare single parent homes. You got to compare welfare, all that stuff in a system where there's no systemic racism with people in a system of systemic racism. That's how you get the true results. Okay. I'm probably the one who bought so well book. Nah, but no, no. That's yeah. You always buy the books. You always buy the books because you're educated on the talking points. So now, listen, I got books of people I don't like, I think is wrong, but you have to research them. You have to understand what they're saying because not everything they're saying is wrong because they'll put their twist to it. No, no, I've never fought anybody. I don't care if it's a Klan's book. Buy the books and read them and come back over here and put us on game so we can know the talking points. We have to know the talking points. So yeah, there's nothing wrong because Thomas Sowell is good at mixing in truth with falsehood. So I'm gonna talk about hillbilly clear. What do you call it? Allergy. Forgot. We're gonna get into that. Okay, because he referenced that book to show how hillbillies were so undereducated is- and isolated, but once they adapted and worked hard, they was no longer the bottom of white trash. They were respectful, American, whatever. Stop. It's all lies. Yeah, but no, you have to buy the books. You have to buy the books. I bought so many books of ops who I did not agree with. So when you buy their books, right, you read it. And then the things that stand out, that sound kind of weird or unbelievable, you highlight those things as questionable. So you get your highlighter or your pen and you underline that. You read the whole book and you come back to everything you underlined or highlighted. And those are up for debate. So that's something you want to either research yourself or bring it over here and say, hey man, I'm biased. Check, so this was said. What do you think about that? And have me look it up. And that's the best way to tell if your book you bought is like truly authentic or if it's a bunch of BS. Peace, Chef. So Chief X, I saved Chief X some time because he was supposed to debate, well, have a discussion with me on Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, and he thought they were undefeated. I was like, bruh, stop. So I saved Chief X some time. So instead of having that discussion, I can go over my research today, and if Chief X thinks something is flawed and think Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell arguments still stand up, then he's welcome to talk about it over here. All right. So first, you see, I ain't been online for a while because I said, let me get my stuff correct. Let me stop hopping online, and my production isn't correct. So I said, let me take some time to put it together correctly. All right. So let's go with this right here. So I haven't got an introduction. I got a new Tether introduction video. All right, hold on. Ta-ta-ta-ta. All right, all right, all right. Let me see where we at. Okay. Playlist. Here we go. And I gotta get back on Mad Hop because he's been all right. So I knew I didn't save that. Okay. And I did some dumb shit. So there's more reason why you ain't hear from me. I think I displaced 4 iPads. I don't know what I did with them, man. I did some foolishness. All right, so here, I don't want this 3 minutes to go too far. All right, anyway. No, not that. All right, so let me just do it the easy way. Let me just do it the easy way. Here we are.
But the thing is, there's a mixture. We are a mixture. What makes us foundational Black Americans, that we're mixed with the indigenous and we're mixed with the
This is the intro, the new intro. Well, I play it sometimes.
Africans who were brought over during the slave trade. And then we had an ethnogenesis. So we became a whole new ethnic group. And that ethnic group was the foundation of the United States, making our ethnic group indigenous to the United States, because we're the first ethnic group of what would become the United States, who built it. We built this thing from scratch. So that makes us indigenous. Unlike the Europeans who came from somewhere else, we were created here. Our ethnogenesis is here.
70% quote unquote African, 30% white, European, right?
That's salute. That's fine.
You can't tell me that I'm just African though. See,
but look, you're picking and choosing.
No, I'm saying I'm both. I'm both
my
things.
girl.
Like when you talk about when you think about the fact that slave women did not have control over their own bodies.
You're right.
Right?
Yes.
You know that you are going to, that's why we run the gamut all the way from as light as me to really dark skin. We run the gamut. That's why. So it's people want us to kind of, I don't understand the need of somebody needing me to be African. I'm an amalgamation. That's what it means to be American. That's what it means to be ADOS in this country. We are an amalgamation of different things. We are unique. So yeah, some of our ancestors came over here, were brought over here, chattel slavery. Mm-hmm. That's true. Some of them intermarried. Some of them some of them come from women who were the victims of. All of that is our history. That's what we're saying. We're not saying that like African slaves, like slavery isn't a part of that, and Africans were enslaved. 70% quote unquote African, 30% white, European, right?
What is ethnogenesis? Ethnogenesis means the process by which a new ethnic group forms. It's when a group of people develops a shared identity, usually because of shared experiences like war, migration, slavery, or colonization, blending of cultures, new language, religion, or customs. Simple example. Think about how African Americans formed. They came from many different African tribes, Yoruba, Igbo, Wolof, etc. Enslaved in America, they lost languages and tribal ties. But over time, they developed a shared culture, music, food, and identity. That's ethnogenesis. Black Americans became a new, distinct people.
Ethnogenesis equals new people formed through shared history plus culture plus struggle. It happens when different groups blend, survive, and build a new identity together.
The DOS term is a very good term. I actually like that. Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term. But these people come over here and they get comfortable around these white supremacists and they feel like they can disrespect Native Black Americans. That's going to stop. We're going to stop that shit.
I think it's worth pointing out that immigrants are piggybacking on the Black experience in America. I'm sorry to say this to the Hispanics in the audience, but I'm sorry you're going to have to throw in your lot with, the Asians and the whites. We didn't descend from slaves. We don't get special benefits. This is the logical, normal, obvious point, and therefore it is the Republican position. The whole reason this country is sensitive to racial issues is because for about 200 years, African Americans got the short end of the stick. There was slavery, there was Jim Crow, and then we had the civil rights laws saying, okay, that's it. We owe them. We're going to spend it all on them. Now suddenly, an immigrant who arrived Friday is demanding special benefits. No, what did we do to you?
Barack is president of the United States of America. We have to understand what Barack says he believes. So we can't get angry at him, Dr. Mavo, when he says the rising tide will lift our boat, because that's where he was raised. That's not to put anything on him. The descendants of enslaved Africans in America have a different experience. First of all, we're the only group of people in this country that did not voluntarily come here. We're forced immigrants. We're also the only group of people in this country that the American government made laws against to keep in bondage. America, one thing about America, they love to talk about stuff. They say, let's talk about it. You talk about it, you get it out. But when it comes to the black, enslaved and black people, they say, shut up. Be quiet. Don't talk about it, because blacks, we are America's dirty little secret, as Dr. Claude Anderson said. And America don't want to deal with the whole question of reparation, repair, and the damage.
In wrestling, they changed it from professional wrestling.
All right. All right. So that dude clicked that was a mistake. All right. So now, here we are. So this is the new FBA tether hate video. All right. Hold on. This is funny. Y'all remember the old one? Hold on. So that's our ethnogenesis introduction.
Let me say.
Okay, so now let me bring you over here. The new tether hate video.
Say that again. I am not black. Okay? Hear me out. Growing up, my mom absolutely hated when we refer to ourselves as black. She's like, you're not black, you're Nigerian, you're African. I feel like the term someone is black obviously comes from the slave era, but it also just describes displaced people that don't know their heritage. So I feel like people that do know their heritage, to try and curb racism in some way, people are going to be racist. Ignorance is ignorance. You can't, but just curb racism in a small way. Stop referring to yourself as black. You know, if you know where you're from, you're raised in a certain household. You know, Somalians are Somalians, Ethiopians are Ethiopians, Nigerians are Nigerians. Like, if you know where you're from, why refer to yourself as a color? I feel like when we say black, it just sounds so harsh, and like, this is black. I'm brown. You know, I'm Nigerian at the end of the day. Like, that's who I am. That's where I come from. So I understand when you say black British or black American, because you don't know where you're from. You're just a person of color in the city that you're in. Obviously, you still be treated the way you're treated, but just like, I feel like it just, when I hear someone refer to me as black, it just sounds so harsh, especially coming from a certain demographic. I think if you have the privilege of knowing where you're from, you shouldn't refer to yourself as a color, because it further, you know, pushes the racism narrative and further.
Here we go.
The way how African Americans prioritize blackness isn't necessarily the same way in which an immigrant would prioritize their blackness. So, you know how African Americans would say, oh, black writer, black creator, black artist, black lawyer, black doctor, black woman in STEM. No, when we come to this country, it's immigrant or nationality, maybe our careers next, and then whatever else comes after that. So immigrant, Jamaican, marketer, whatever else comes after that. The issue that you're having is we don't see ourselves as one of you. Some of us that come to this country don't even have a legal right to be here. You get me? So while you are fighting your fight, which is that of blackness, we are fighting our fight as immigrants first before the way.
Another thing before I get off, man, you 110% right about Africans, bro. 110%. My mom is from Nigeria. My father's from Liberia. Tariq, you are 110% right about Africans, bro. My entire life, man, my family used the word Akata like it was nothing. My mom use it. My uncles use it. Cousins use it. They all have their ideology that they are totally different from black Americans. I put my family on that, man. My wife is an American. When I first met my wife, my mom didn't want me to marry my wife, Tariq. She told me, you brought an Akata here. Don't bring no Akata. Another
Finish high school. Don't have a kid before you're 20 years old. Get married first. Get a job. Keep that job. Don't quit it until you get another job. And I would add one. There are think tanks on the left, like the Brookings Institution, and on the right, like the American Enterprise Institute. And they both give the same formula for success. Finish high school. Don't have a kid before you're 20 years old. Get married first. Get a job. Keep that job. Don't quit it until you get another job. And I would add one more thing, and that is avoid the criminal justice system. You do those things, you will not be poor.
Scientific racism, was the false belief that science could prove the biological superiority of white people and the inferiority of non-white races, especially black people. It was widely accepted in the 1800s and early 1900s in Europe and the US, often used to justify slavery, segregation, colonialism, white supremacy. Stereotypes and pseudoscience. About black people at the time claim, pseudoscientific justification, purpose. In its sign, blacks are intellectually inferior, craniometry and IQ manipulation, justify lack of education and voting rights. Blacks are more emotional and primitive, claimed underdeveloped brain structures, support racist depictions and stereotypes. Blacks feel less pain, false medical beliefs used to justify medical abuse and experimentation. Blacks are naturally suited for labor, claimed physical traits made them ideal for slavery, used to rationalize unpaid exploitation. Blacks are hypersexual, claimed larger genitals and weak morality, used to justify lynchings, especially of black men. The legacy. These pseudoscientific claims fueled Jim Crow laws, segregation, the Dred Scott decision, medical apartheid, e.g. Tuskegee syphilis study, Nazi racial ideology, which borrowed from American eugenics. Final thoughts. Scientific racism was not science. It was a weaponized lie dressed in lab coats and charts. It reinforced white supremacy, justified black oppression, and continues to influence racist myths and inequalities to this day.
Institutional racism, systemic racism, structural racism, pernicious racism. Former AG Eric Holder says America is bedeviled by what he calls pernicious racism, something that America, he claims, is reluctant to address. Codified segregation of public schools has been barred since Brown, but in too many of our school districts, significant divisions persist and segregation has reoccurred, including zero-tolerance school discipline practices that, while well-intentioned and aimed at promoting school safety, affect black males at a rate 3 times higher than their white peers, end of quote. Here, moral to the story, maybe, just maybe, it was the behavior of these black kids. Are you really prepared to accuse teachers, the teachers union on whom the Democratic Party depends, you know, are you willing to accuse these teachers of engaging in systemic institutional racism against the very students that they signed up to teach? Really?
The school-to-prison pipeline isn't about bad kids. It's about a broken, biased system. Opponents claim the school-to-prison pipeline isn't racism. It's just that some kids behave badly and suffer the consequences. Point number 1, the data proves it's not just about behavior. If this were about bad behavior, then kids who misbehave equally would be punished equally. But here's a debate-style rebuttal to the claim that the school-to-prison pipeline isn't about bad kids. It's about a broken, biased system. Opponents claim the school-to-prison pipeline isn't racism. It's just that some kids behave badly and suffer the consequences. Point number 1, the data proves it's not just about behavior. If this were about bad behavior, then kids who misbehave equally would be punished equally. But that's not what the numbers say. Black students make up 15% of enrollment, but account for 39% of school suspensions, 31% of school-related arrests, and this is even when controlling for the same infractions. Example, black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective behaviors like defiance, while white students get counseling. So the issue isn't who misbehaves, it's who gets punished and how harshly. Point number 2, the pipeline targets black kids early and unfairly. Black children are punished more severely starting in preschool, literally age 4. Once a student is suspended or expelled, their chances of dropping out or being arrested increase dramatically. The system starts treating black youth like criminals instead of kids who need support. That's not about behavior. That's about perception, bias, and race. Point 3. White kids get more chances. Black kids get punished. When a white student is caught with drugs, they're often sent to rehab or counseling. A black student in the same situation is more likely to be arrested or expelled. That's not consequences for bad behavior. That's a racially biased double standard. Closing statement. This isn't about bad kids. It's about bad systems. The school-to-prison pipeline punishes black children more harshly, more quickly, and more permanently than their white peers for the same actions. If we really care about discipline and accountability, we should be asking why the rules change depending on the student's skin color. That's not fairness. That's racism, plain and simple.
Now, disparate sentencing. In our criminal justice system, systemic, unwarranted racial disparities remain disturbingly common. Disparate outcomes are not only shameful and unacceptable, they impede our ability to see that justice is done. A criminal justice system that treats groups of people differently and punishes them unequally has a much more negative impact than misguided words that we can reject out of hand, end of quote. It is true that a black criminal defendant will get a sentence 19.5% longer than a white criminal defendant who commits the same crime. What's also true is that the U.S. Sentencing Commission says this disparity can be explained away by legitimate factors. Judges make sentencing decisions based on many legitimate considerations that are not or cannot be measured, end of quote. Now,
is racial sentencing disparity evidence of systemic racism? Yes, the evidence strongly shows systemic racism plays a role. While it's true that judges consider many legal factors when making sentencing decisions, like prior record, severity of crime, plea deal versus trial, remorse, etc., research consistently finds that even when these factors are controlled for, Black and Latino defendants tend to receive harsher sentences than white defendants for the same crimes. This unexplained gap is not random. It reflects systemic racial bias, even if it's not always intentional on the part of individual judges. What the data shows, even after legitimate factors are controlled for. A U.S. Death Sentencing Commission, 2017, report found Black male offenders received sentences that were on average 19.1% longer than those of white male offenders for similar crimes, even after accounting for criminal history and other legal variables. Harvard Law Review, 20 judges showed discretionary racial bias, especially in drug, theft, and firearm cases. Federal Justice Statistics. Black defendants are more likely to be detained pre-trial, less likely to get plea deals, and more likely to face mandatory minimums. These disparities persist even when controlling for prior records, severity of offense, and plea deals, which undermines the argument that sentencing differences are purely due to legitimate legal variables. Judges use many considerations. Is that a valid rebuttal? Yes and no. Yes, judges do consider valid factors like prior convictions, use of a weapon, role in the crime, whether the defendant pleaded guilty, victim impact statements. But here's the issue. These factors themselves are often racially skewed due to systemic factors upstream, over-policing in Black communities, more arrests and records, biased charging decisions by prosecutors, more severe charges, pretrial detention, more pressure to accept unfair plea deals, poverty and lack of legal resources, less capable defense lawyers. So even when judges think they're being neutral, they are operating within a racially biased system, implicit bias and judicial discretion. Numerous psychological studies show that implicit bias affects decision-making, including among judges who believe they are fair. A 2009 study in Law and Human Behavior found that judges, including liberal ones, unconsciously associate Black defendants with violence more than white defendants. When judges have wide discretion, racial disparities tend to widen, not shrink. Sentencing disparity didn't start in a vacuum. It is the direct descendant of earlier forms of racial control. Slave codes, Black codes after slavery, Jim Crow justice, the war on drugs, which disproportionately targeted Black communities. These historical layers informed modern judicial systems, often unconsciously reinforcing racial hierarchies. The claim that racial disparities in sentencing exist because judges consider many unmeasured factors is only partially true and does not explain away the disparities. Those factors are often themselves tainted by systemic inequality. Even when controlling for them, racial sentencing disparities remain. That makes it a clear example of systemic racism, where institutions produce unequal outcomes even without explicit racist intent.
Now, another frequently cited example of the institutional racism that supposedly exists in America is the fact that would-be borrowers are turned down at a higher rate for mortgage applications.
According to a new report, Black people in Baltimore received less than half as many mortgages as their white neighbors. Black people make up the majority of the city's population. White Baltimoreans looking to buy homes were approved for mortgages 75% of the time, compared to 61% for Black applicants.
True. Would-be Black borrowers are turned down at a higher rate than would-be white borrowers, who in fact are turned down at a higher rate than would-be Asian borrowers. Now, are the banks discriminating against white people in favor of Asians? And by the way, Black-owned community banks turn down would-be Black applicants at least the same rate as do the majority white banks.
Why mortgage approval disparities still prove systemic racism? Opponents claim, if mortgage lenders were racist, how come white people get denied more often than Asians? That just proves it's not about race, it's about credit. Let me respond with facts and context. Yes, statistically, Asian Americans are denied mortgages less often than white Americans. But that comparison misses the entire point of systemic racism and misunderstands how discrimination. Point number one, systemic racism is about patterns of harm, not group rankings. Racism isn't only proven when Group A is treated worse than all others. It's shown when a group is consistently disadvantaged across the board, despite equal qualifications. Study after study shows that Black applicants, regardless of income, credit score, or education, are denied loans at higher rates than white applicants. So the issue isn't who has the lowest denial rate, it's why Black Americans are consistently punished more for the same financial profile. Point two, Black people are still penalized even with equal or better credentials. A 2023 Fed report showed Black applicants were 80% more likely to be denied than white applicants with the same credit and income. That's not bad budgeting. That's systemic bias baked into the process. Point number three, historical racism laid the foundation. White families benefited from decades of HA-backed loans, redlining, and GI Bill housing access. Black families were systematically shut out, and today's approval patterns reflect that ongoing legacy. The average white family today has 8x the wealth of the average Black family, and mortgage discrimination helps keep it that way. Final point, the fact that Asians are approved more often than whites doesn't erase anti-Black discrimination. It just shows that racism isn't always linear. Different groups experience different forms of bias. So yes, mortgage disparities do prove systemic racism, especially when Black Americans are the most consistently penalized group, regardless of how well they meet the criteria.
How do you explain that? How do you explain that Chinese Americans who were victimized by racism, in fact, they were the first nationality to be excluded by the Chinese Immigration Act. How do you explain that they have a higher net income than do whites? How do you explain that Japanese Americans have a higher household income than do whites? How do you explain that Korean Americans have a higher net income than do whites? How do you explain Nigerian Americans have a higher net income, household income than do whites? These are matters of behavior, matters of choices. There's nothing stopping anybody Black from succeeding in America.
Median Black family income has been lower than median white family income for generations. But the median per capita income of Asian groups is more than $15,000 a year higher than the median per capita income of white Americans. Is this the white supremacy we're so often warned about?
And a common talking point used to try to dismiss the reality of systemic racism. But this comparison is deeply flawed, and here's why. Flawed premise, comparing select immigrant groups to native Black Americans. Saying that systemic racism doesn't exist because Asians or Nigerians outperform whites is like saying there's no sexism in Hollywood because some women are more famous than most men. It ignores who gets in, how they're selected, and the very different starting lines. Let's break this down piece by piece. 1. Nigerians and some Asian immigrants are hyper-selected. Hyper-selection, a filtered group, not the general population. Nigerian immigrants in America are among the most educated immigrant groups in the country. Over 60% have at least a bachelor's degree, compared to 33% of U.S. adults overall. Many enter on student or skilled worker visas. They're already elite before arriving. The same applies to Asian immigrants. Chinese, Indian, and Korean immigrants often come from the top educational and economic classes in their home countries. They are selected through high-skill immigration channels, not randomly. So when you compare these hyper-selected groups to Black Americans, whose ancestors were enslaved and denied education, land, wealth, and full citizenship for centuries, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing cream skimmed off the top of one society to a group systemically denied opportunity in another. 2. Black Americans were not immigrants. They were captives. Unlike voluntary immigrants, Black Americans were brought here in chains, not by choice, stripped of language, culture, and family, locked out of education, housing, capital, and full citizenship for 250 plus years. They weren't selected for skills, they were enslaved. Generational wealth was deliberately destroyed, not absent due to effort. 3. Systemic racism isn't about individual outcomes, it's about unequal structures. Even if some groups outperform others, systemic racism still exists when Black people with the same education and income as whites are more likely to be denied loans, live in lower quality neighborhoods, are profiled more by police, receive less pay for the same job. Systemic racism means the rules of the game are tilted, not that no one Black can succeed. You don't prove racism is gone just because a few people run uphill faster. You prove it by leveling the hill. 4. Even successful immigrant groups still face racism. Asian Americans have the model minority label but face hate crimes, especially post-COVID, glass ceilings in corporate leadership, stereotyping and cultural erasure. Many Black immigrants, including Nigerians, report that their children still face the same discrimination as Black Americans because society doesn't see nationality, it sees race. Success does not erase racism. Black excellence often occurs in spite of it, not because it doesn't exist. High five. GDP equity. Economic averages mask wide disparities. The median wealth of Black families is about 1/10 that of white families. A high-income Black household is still more likely to live in a high-poverty neighborhood than a low-income white household. Black college graduates have more student debt and lower returns on their degrees than white peers. So even when some groups have higher GDP or incomes, that doesn't mean the playing field is fair. Conclusion: there is no contradiction between some immigrant groups doing economically well and systemic racism still deeply affecting Black Americans. The success of hyper-selected immigrant groups doesn't disprove systemic racism. It actually highlights how structural barriers continue to suppress the progress of those who were never given a fair start. So the argument that Asians and Nigerians are doing well, so racism is over, is not only oversimplified, it's historically and statistically misleading.
So when you hear those stats, you don't believe that systemic racism is in America anymore. So what would you attribute these numbers to?
Oh, for crying out loud. Disparities do not mean systemic racism. Disparities mean disparities. For example, a Black married man has the same unemployment rate as do whites.
For more than a quarter of a century, in no year has the annual poverty rate of Black married couple families, been as high as 10%. And in no year has the poverty rate of Americans as a whole been as low as 10%. If Black poverty is caused by systemic racism, do racists make an exception for Blacks who are married?
No, Black married men do not have the same unemployment rates as white married men. Even when controlling for marital status, a significant racial disparity persists in unemployment rates. Unemployment rates, black versus white married men. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, in 2005, white married men had an unemployment rate 2.5%. Black married men had an unemployment rate of 5.1%. This indicates that black married men were more than twice as likely to be unemployed compared to their white counterparts, despite sharing the same marital status. Why do people assume the rates are equal? The misconception that black and white married men have similar unemployment rates may stem from the belief that marriage inherently stabilizes employment across all demographics. While marriage is associated with lower unemployment rates, it does not eliminate racial disparities. Underlying factors contributing to the disparity. Several systemic issues contribute to the persistent unemployment gap between black and white married men. 1. Hiring discrimination. Studies have shown that employers are less likely to call back black applicants compared to white applicants with identical resumes. 2. Mass incarceration. Black men are disproportionately affected by incarceration, which impacts their employment prospects even after release. 3. Structural barriers. Factors such as disparities in education quality, access to professional networks, and geographic location contribute to employment challenges for black men. Tack conclusion. While marriage is linked to lower unemployment rates, it does not bridge the racial unemployment gap. Black married men continue to face higher unemployment rates than white married men due to systemic issues that extend beyond marital status.
And of course, there's that great book that was written, the Hillbilly Elegy. It was on the bestseller list for more than a year consecutively.
J.D. Vance, now Senator Vance.
Yes, and these are people who have faced zero racism.
They are white.
And they are white and zero racism. And also they're back in the 30s when they did IQ studies, their IQs were not only at the same level as those of blacks, they had the same pattern, namely that the young people, whether they were black or hillbilly, would have an IQ very close to the national average at age 6. But by the time they were teenagers, it kept going down and down and down because it's relative to the other people of that age group, and they simply were falling behind. So it was clearly not biological; it was social. But despite that, these hillbilly counties had incomes that were not only lower than the national average; they were lower than the average of black incomes. For a period of half a century. It may have been longer than that because I only went through half a century. But in every study that was done over that half century, they scored lower, their family incomes were lower than the family incomes of blacks. So obviously there must be other things that cause people to be poor other than racism.
Let's be clear, Hillbilly Elegy is not a book about poverty. It's a book about blaming poor people for being poor. J.D. Vance tells a compelling personal story, but he turns that into a political weapon, suggesting that millions of working-class white Americans are poor because of bad values, not because of the system that failed them. Point 1. He ignores structural causes of poverty. Vance focuses on individual failure, addiction, laziness, irresponsibility. What he ignores are the real forces that gutted these communities: factory closures, corporate offshoring, union busting, wage stagnation, broken healthcare systems. You don't fix poverty by telling people to try harder while ignoring the fact that there are no jobs, no clinics, and no hope. Point 2. He treats his dysfunctional family as the blueprint. Vance universalizes his traumatic upbringing as if it's how all hillbillies live. That's false. Appalachia is full of resilience, community, and cultural pride. His book erases that by pushing a stereotype that paints poor white people as self-destructive and doomed unless they act like elite Ivy Leaguers. Point 3. He benefited from the very programs he criticizes. J.D. Vance went to Yale. He used government loans. He had mentors, networks, and safety nets. Then he turns around and tells people those same supports don't work and should be cut. That's not just hypocritical, it's dangerous. Conclusion. Hillbilly Elegy doesn't explain poverty, it just lectures poor people. If you want to understand the real causes of rural struggle, listen to historians, sociologists, and community activists, not a venture capitalist using trauma for political gain. Truths versus myths in Hillbilly Elegy. Topic: truth, myth, J.D. Vance's trauma. Real experiences, valid personal pain. Represents all white rural Americans. Addiction and hopelessness. Widespread issues in poor communities, caused purely by bad culture. Hard work equals success. Can help individuals, not a universal fix when systems are broken. Poverty in Appalachia exists, complex, entirely the fault of individuals, not policy. Welfare programs helped many, including Vance. Always make people dependent. Rural pride and culture, strong community traditions, erased in favor of dysfunction narrative.
There were enough black free Negroes who supported the Confederacy that they voluntarily formed a regiment in the state of North Carolina to fight for the Confederacy. And black Confederate troops are featured on the cover of Harper's Weekly in 1863. Frederick Douglass used this as an argument to make Lincoln allow black men to fight. Wow. Because remember, Lincoln didn't want to do it. Lincoln made a famous statement in 1862. He said, I suppose we could arm them, but if we did, their arms would end up in the hands of the Confederates within a week. Because he thought that they were incompetent, not smart enough to win. And eventually, as I said, the North was losing the war. Frederick Douglass was agitating. And this book, by Casemore, persuaded him to change his mind and incrementally. So, again, it's not only the myth makers who created the idealized Lincoln.
Let's address a myth that keeps getting recycled. The idea that black people willingly fought for the Confederacy. The truth? That claim is deeply misleading, historically inaccurate, and used to distort the reality of what the Confederacy stood for. Point number 1. The Confederacy explicitly fought to preserve slavery. Confederate Vice President H. Stevens said in 1861 that the Confederacy was founded on the principle that the Negro is not equal to the white man. The cornerstone speech, the Confederate Constitution, and state secession declarations all make it clear slavery was the cause. Why would an enslaved people fight to preserve their own chains? Point number 2. Black people were enslaved laborers, not Confederate soldiers. Tens of thousands of black people were forced to work for the Confederate Army as cooks, body servants, laborers, ditch diggers. They were not armed soldiers and not volunteers. Confederate leaders themselves banned the arming of black men until the final months of the war, when they were desperate and already losing. Point 3. Even Confederates knew it was a bad look. Confederate General Howell Cobb said, "If slaves will make good soldiers, our whole theory of slavery is wrong." That's the point. Arming black men would have destroyed their whole justification for slavery, that black people were inferior and needed white control. Point number 4. Actual black soldiers fought for the Union. Over 180,000 black men fought for the Union. Many escaped from the South and volunteered to destroy slavery. They fought bravely and paid in blood for a country that didn't even give them full rights. That is where black allegiance stood, not with the Confederacy, but against it. Closing statement. So no, black Americans didn't fight for the Confederacy. They were enslaved by it, exploited by it, and in the end, many fought to destroy it. The myth of the Black Confederate is not history. It's historical revisionism designed to whitewash slavery and excuse treason.
Many of the free Negroes stayed in the South. Do you know in the 1860 census, there were 440,000 about free Negroes, I mentioned that earlier. More than half lived in the states that were the Confederacy and the border states where slavery was free. This is the worst, the dirtiest secret in African American history is that a surprisingly high percentage of the free Negroes in the South owned slaves themselves. And some of them owned, we explain it away by saying, oh, but they only owned their mother or they only owned, yeah. They own their mother, they own their sister, they own their wife, and they own some other workers too. A surprisingly high number owned workers who they did not liberate throughout the South.
Let me stop you right there. Yes, some free black people owned slaves, but if you think that somehow cancels out or justifies the centuries of racialized chattel slavery driven by white Americans, then you're not arguing in good faith. You're misusing a complex reality to dodge responsibility and rewrite history. Rebuttal point number 1. The scale and power were not even close. White slaveholding was systemic, generational, and foundational to American wealth. Millions of Africans were enslaved by white individuals, governments, banks, and corporations. Black slaveholders made up less than 2% of all black Americans. And even then, most owned 1-2 people, often family members. So if you're pointing to the oppressed few who copied what the oppressors built, you're trying to compare a storm to a raindrop. Rebuttal point number 2. Most black slaveholders were trying to save or protect loved ones. Legal restrictions made it impossible or expensive to officially free family members. Many free black people owned spouses, children, or parents on paper to keep them from being sold or killed by white enslavers. That's not exploitation, that's survival under an unjust system. Rebuttal point number 3. Yes, a few black people tried to profit, but who taught them that? A small minority of black elites, especially in places like New Orleans, did buy into the slave economy for profit. But they were imitating a white-created system, not inventing it. If your gotcha is that a few black people tried to play the capitalist game they were born into, you're blaming the mimic, not the master. White Americans didn't learn slavery from black people. Black people learned survival from white America's blueprint. Rebuttal point number 4. The laws were made by and for white supremacy. White lawmakers barred free blacks from freeing slaves easily. They criminalized black prosperity, feared free black people, and did everything possible to maintain control. You can't blame the victim for navigating a system built to destroy them. Closing statement. So yes, if you want to talk about black slaveholders, let's do it honestly. Let's talk about a few black people trying to free their families or navigate survival, a system so twisted it forced the oppressed to use the master's tools. And let's talk about who created that system in the first place. Because if you think a few black people owning slaves invalidates the brutality and racial caste of American slavery, you're not defending truth, you're just dodging accountability.
All right. Yeah, so as you can see, you got Henry Louis Gates Jr. sitting there lying about or over go eat over exaggerating lying about blacks joining the Confederacy to fight for their enslavement. That just sounds retarded. No, we're gonna like if there's a war going on to fight to free you or to keep you enslaved, you're gonna say, no, I'm gonna join the side that's gonna keep me enslaved. That's stupid. And like more attempts to undermine us to make us look stupid. And that's why that's why I had it read what scientific racism was all about. It's about portraying us like as permanent imbeciles, people who just can't get it, can't understand, can't learn. But people, and keep in mind, scientific racism goes back to like 1850s. 1850s. This stuff from the Confederates, like people who hated us, who wanted to keep us enslaved, people who want to keep people like Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell enslaved, saying they're dumb and they didn't care about the exceptions to the rule. Y'all all deserve slavery. So when you over 100, 200 years later, and coons like Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder and more, when you parrot these comments that was used to justify to enslavers, and you're trying to hold them up to the, as though they got some legitimacy to them, it's straight to stuff, you know, it's just stuff. Again, it's like fighting for the Confederacy. So when they talk about blacks fighting for the Confederacy, that's literally Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell. Like they're doing it now. The Candace Owens, you know, anybody who cherry picked these talking points, they're fighting for the Confederacy. They chose a side. They're fighting to be enslaved, while we're fighting for freedom. So you see, they are masters. So what's this what makes it so dangerous, because he would read these books, these articles. Same thing with Henry Louis Gates Jr. They would read this history, right? And they'll know it. And now they know what to extract from it. They know what to omit from it. And they'll present it to the public because they know the public don't know this information. And since these guys are credible, since these guys are, I think Larry Elder is a Harvard lawyer, and because they have these credentials, they credit like that. When they say it must be true. So when you say Larry Elder is undefeated, you know, I could beat him in debates. It's because you're considering his background, his educational background, his educational background, and some of the cherry pick data, and it sounds good. You don't know if it actually is good. It sounds about right, and you take it and run with it. And that's what most white supremacists do. Okay, that's what they'll take what sounds right and run with it. So when you go to Thomas Sowell comments, right, the comment section, go in there and read it. It's like 90% white folks. Larry Elder. So who's benefiting from these hateful comments directed towards FBA DAS? Who? White folks. Yeah. They are eating stuff alive. Yeah. And that's just that. So they're literally fighting for the Confederacy. And you don't see black folks in those comments saying, "Yeah, you're right, bro. We're stupid." You know, marriages. Yeah, you don't see black folks in the comment section of Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder like, "Yeah, man, you're right. We're dumb. We deserve to be treated like second-class citizens. We deserve to be put in the caste system." No, we're not doing that. The majority of those comments are coming from white supremacists, right? Why? Yeah, because it makes them feel better about how they always treated us. So when the likes of Yvette Carnell, Tone Talks, Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Clark Anderson, when they get out there and speak on behalf of us, they're faced with that resistance. They're like, wait a minute. Now that's justified because you guys don't be married. You guys are on welfare. Like all these excuses dismiss systemic racism. So every last point. And then they go to, well, if white folks, this is Larry Elder, well, if racism is, so this premise, his premise is, if that is why folks are more likely to be only both black people. And if that is supposed to prove that racism exists, then he's saying, well, why does Asian, why do Asians get approved more than black people? He's saying, yeah, it's all about white supremacy and white supremacists, white supremacists, right? To the top. And how is it possible Asians are on top of them in their own white supremacist system? But that's not brought in the brain that we receive from these high selected immigrants. They come over here with the decorated backgrounds. A lot of them are highly educated, highly skilled, and some of them are wealthy before they come to the country. And that's why, so so if they get approved for the loan for white folks, it's probably because they got the money, got the credit, right? Their credit and money is kind over, so they become more attractive to the loaner, the loan officer. Again, it's a small sublet group. When we talk about white people getting more loans and things like that with us, it's 10 times the amount, not 10 times the amount of Asians. Hold on 1 second. Yes, it's a disingenuous position to take. It's a disingenuous argument. Okay, I didn't know that was all right. So with that being said, let me shift this over here. Okay, so now what about when the dollar? Let's talk about the dollar. Let's talk about, in order for society to be successful, right? And the success has ranges of success. The dollar got to circulate a certain amount of times within a neighborhood. Okay, so keep that in mind. So when Black Wall Street was rocking, I think the dollar circulated 19 times, which is like unbelievable, right? So I got some better stats for y'all. Hold on. Oh, all right, let me see. My audio choppy. All right, it should be good now, right? Let me check it out. Let me check the audio out. This and you see. Yeah, it's good now. Okay. So all I was saying was the people like Thomas Sowell and the people like Larry Elder. This is what I was basically saying. And the Henry Louis Gates Jr. Like these people are believed. Not let's forget about white supremacists. I'm talking about Black Americans, FBA does. Those guys are believed because we not only consider their talking points, we consider their decorated backgrounds, their decorated educational backgrounds. So we look at Larry Elder, Harvard lawyer, Thomas Sowell, all these guys, like college graduates, some from prestigious schools, articulate, well groomed, well dressed, and then we look at their information, right? So they speak on things of history, right? That sounds like it's unique. It took some real research. So what makes those guys dangerous is that those guys will know everything they're talking about, right? But they will purposely omit things in that 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 book or that article. Okay. And they will only talk about, so they would cherry pick the data basically. Hold on. What to say? right, 1 second. All right, yeah. So that's what makes them dangerous because they're highly educated, they're decorated, they're well dressed, well groomed, articulate, and they misrepresent the information intentionally to satisfy white supremacists, to justify harming us. That's the weirdest thing possible. All this is done to justify harming black folks physically and uh, in terms of propaganda. Peace, remnant. Okay, it's good now. Right, right, right. So yeah, so these guys would sound like they're correct. So I don't fault anybody that listen to these guys and be like, yo, damn, that's wild. That's some interesting information. Blacks enslaved blacks. Wow. FBA FBA enslaved FBAs. FBA enslaving FBAs. Wow. FBA's fought for the Confederacy. Wow. Like that stuff sounds like it's deep. But when you do further investigation, you be like, okay, it's dudes. They're half lying, half telling the truth. Man, you'll get yeah, so they're half lying and half telling the truth. So I saved Chief X some time because he wanted to have that discussion on Larry Elder talking points. And I personally believe Larry Elder is worse than like he's more sloppy than Thomas Sowell with these hateful recounts of history concerning FBA does. So anyway, as I was talking about the dollar, so Black Wall Street dollar circulates 19 times. At that time, it circulated 19 times, which is going to produce a millionaire city, a millionaire district. So I would like to. So when tethers come on here, and like I'm always invited to different podcasts to talk, but I'm about to have a new rule. If you haven't came over here first, I'm not going nowhere else. Yeah, so that's my new rule. If anybody's invited me to their podcast, if they haven't came over here and first and talked to me, it ain't happening because people don't really want to have an honest discussion. People want to have a gotcha discussion. Like again, every time American Dream called in, every last time, it was never an honest discussion. It was always a gotcha discussion. Every time Kwame called in, it was never an honest discussion. It was always a gotcha discussion. Every last time. Because an honest discussion is going to bring about honesty. And those guys cannot be honest. Most tethers cannot be honest. Same thing with white supremacists. Like when you see Tariq Nasheed engage with white supremacists, like they just cannot be honest. And then they'll like time waste when he traps them in on history and certain events and when it's clear and it's irrefutable, they will not acknowledge it. They'll speak around it. They'll start deflecting. They'll start asking about his Tariq's. Oh man, what you do with the? We start pocket watching Tariq. This is what they do, man. But an honest discussion on these talking points, that's all we want to have. And an honest discussion is just really recounting history. It's just saying, hey, this happened in America. It advantaged white people. It disadvantaged black folks. Is that true or false? Like, there's no gotcha anything. We're just recounting history. Peace, greets. And then you have a lot of black immigrants, the new blacks, I call them. I actually had a new term for them I got to think about. But you got the new blacks who come over here and they be on their immigration shit. Like they don't be about black power. All the stuff B1. Everything we say, they're not on that. They'll cosplay just to fit in and extract from us, immolate us, but they don't have that experience. And that's what people are trying to say to us. But it's not really like that talking point isn't really like honed in on. So you gotta think about it like this. All of our existence in this country, we've been affected by white supremacy, every last one of us. Ancestors to our current children. Every last one of us directly, right? We're not talking about indirectly. Every last one of us directly is affected by white supremacy. Now, watch this. You ready for this? Black immigrants cannot say the same thing. So when you talk about black immigrants across the world, it's normally their ancestors who were directly affected by white supremacy or white supremacists. And that's it. Now they're feeling the indirect effects of it, but they're not directly, like after their ancestors, the ones that came afterwards, they're not directly affected by white supremacists because white supremacists don't live in their country. They're not the judges, they're not the police officers, they're not the librarians, the employers, the bankers, right, directly blocking them. They're not directly in the welfare office blocking them. They're not directly their teachers. So that is the division. That's the divide in experiences that we have that they don't have. But because we don't leave our country, and I don't blame you, there's nothing to brag about leaving a first world, going to a third world. I don't know the flex, but to each his own. So because we don't leave our country, we tend to think all black people experience what we experience, like direct white supremacy. So when the new blacks come over here, we're talking to them as though they are directly affected, as though their teachers, bankers, lawyers, judges, politicians, presidents are all white and they're out to get them. This is why they come over here like, bro, what are you talking about? They be like little standoffish. They can't not relate. So now what happens is they might face some discrimination themselves. They might be pulled over, but don't forget, their discrimination is because they're being misidentified to be one of us. So they're not the target, okay? They're just being misidentified as one of us. So if they face discrimination, they're facing it that way. They're being misidentified. You know how when you read in the paper and a shooter, somebody was shot, in the leg, whatever, but they were misidentified. They were not the target. That's kind of what happens when they get discriminated against. So they'll find themselves in positions of authority to address that, but they're not addressing the system. They're addressing their personal accounts. Hey, that officer got to pay for what he did to me. Hey, that bank loan officer got to pay for what they did to me. But they don't see, or they can never see, that it's a system of bank loan officers that are out here mistreating people. So they fight for their individual experiences. And most of what they fight for is immigration. That okay, that's another thing we cannot relate with. So while we're fighting for civil rights, you know, constitutional rights, they're over here fighting for immigration rights, as you heard the Jamaican lady articulate. Okay, so they're fighting for immigration rights. See, so there's really other than us being black, physically, there's really no commonalities against white supremacy that we agree with. Hey, let me see the comment. I was listening to Tariq live earlier today, and this suspected tether said he was from Memphis. Oh boy, I heard that too. Dude sounded so, yeah. So that is the what they call that? They call that that might be part of the immolation, but believe me, I mean it's possible, yes, but you gotta do it again. Oh my God. This guy been killing my life. Or he been so when I keep going on Paul, that's this guy. He's been very active this morning, more than he ever has been. Okay, so now I gotta go back. So I'm outside chilling. It's a beautiful day, but I keep going back in the house. So that's why you guys can't hear me. When I keep going back in the house, the connection is choppy. But let me take him to the bathroom. Hold on. Yes, give me a second. All right. Well, that dude was flogging and perpetrating. He didn't say Maine one time when he was Yeah, but even if they do say Maine or use our dialect or some of our slang, don't forget that these guys they get lessons from each other. Don't forget that these guys get lessons for sit down. So these guys get lessons from other tethers to teach them how to emulate us. So the guy from 12 Years of Slavery that played in I think also Get Out, he said that the dude from WC Connection, that West Coast group, he said that he was called in to teach them how to speak like us. All right. So I got clips of that. Matter of fact, let me go into those. Let me go into those. Give me a second. This is gonna be interesting. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this right here. Yeah, so check this out. No, not that. Not that.
Are our people, and that we are.
Not that. All right, give me a second. Not that. Not what I want. Oh, okay. Blah blah blah. Let me skip past all that. I could come back to that. All right, so remember, I go by FBA DIES. I go by Foundational Black American Descendants of Slaves, right? And that's a good name. That's a good name. All right, let's cook.
The DOS term is a very good term. I
Told
actually
you.
like that. Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term. The DOS term is a very good term. I actually like that. Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term.
All right, so that's why I source up. I don't know what everybody else do, but I source up. So I know DIES is a great term. Tariq Nasheed agrees with me, so that's why I say I'm FBA DIES. I'm a foundational Black American, and I'm also an American descendant of slave or slavery. All right, I'm both. So I know what I'm saying is right. All right. So let me get this. No, no, no. Now, viewer discretion advised. So you're going to hear some things that you agree with, then you're going to hear some tether babble that's going to make you cringe. Okay. So, all right. Okay. And do I have anything else? Do I want to do the dollar? Hmm. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Can I go sit down over there? Get out of my way. I gotta work. All right. Oh, okay. I forgot. I knew I forgot to add something in there. So did y'all know Toussaint, the Haitian? You know, it's interesting that Tethers would say, "Hey, man, they would go with the lie that we enslaved each other and don't understand what was going on." But do y'all know Toussaint from the Haitian Revolutionary, the Haitian Revolution, the revolutionary? Yeah, do y'all know that he literally enslaved his own people to build Haiti back up, and they were mad at him. The Haitians, they hated him for that. Yeah, he had his military come through and force the Haitians after the Revolutionary War. He forced, using the military, those Haitians back into slave labor to build Haiti back up. Okay, so we have a real account of somebody, quote unquote, black enslaving their own people. Now, there's no special context. They're buying their family out of, no, he ain't doing that. He ain't buying nobody out of slavery. He didn't manumit anybody. No. Physical, brutal slavery. And they resented him, those Haitians. So when he got set up by the French and they got rid of him, Dessalines came back and he brought it back. Like, he got rid of that slave system that Toussaint set up. All right, so that's something you won't see Tethers mention. All right, so let me go. Okay, here we go. So I got this right here. Let me pause that. Then I got to run to the store and come right back. But I had definitely. I got some. I got a lot of information, man. I got a lot of information.
The DOS term is a very good term. I actually like that. Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term. The DOS.
I concur.
Immigrants are piggybacking on the black experience in America. I'm sorry to say this to the Hispanics in the audience, but I'm sorry you're going to have to throw in your lot with, the Asians and the whites. We didn't descend from slaves. We don't get special benefits. This is the logical, normal, obvious point, and therefore it is the Republican position. The whole reason this country is sensitive to racial issues is because for about 200 years, African Americans got the short end of the stick. There was slavery, there was Jim Crow, and then we had the civil rights laws saying, okay, that's it. We owe them. We're going to spend it all on them. Now suddenly, an immigrant who arrived Friday is demanding special benefits. No, what did we do to you? I think it's worth...
He said, no, what did we do to you? Right. Listen, white folks aren't stupid. Okay, they're not going to sit there and just pay anybody who claims to be a descendant of slaves. Like, yeah, all right. Why would they, okay, so we're just calling for 20 million. I'm sorry, we are calling for 20 trillion. Why would they pay 200 trillion? Hey, why would they pay 200 trillion dollars as opposed to 20? Because if the Latinos successfully latched on to our reparations claim, if Tethers did, that amount go from 20 trillion to 200 trillion. Why would they do that? They're like, hell no, we're going to pay the people who need to be paid. Look at the Diddy complaints, right? People hopping on that class action lawsuit. Why would Diddy lawyers be like, all right, everybody, whoever just makes a claim, we're going to pay? No, they're going to have you prove and dismiss your claims if you're not part of that lineage.
Off of affirmative action, absolutely, because I suffered too. They can't discern if you are African or if you're African American.
He said they can't discern. This is their go-to. They can't discern if you're African or African American. Brother, yes, they can, because when you get pulled over and when I hand them my license, my last name is Harrison. When you hand when you hand them your license, your last name is Umbuktu. You dig? Yeah, he knows you're not he knows you're not FBA. So he may or may not handle you a certain way. That's up in the air. But when I hand my license over, when some of y'all hand y'all license over, and that thing say Williams or Johnson, you did Jenkins, whatever, they know that you're from this country. And you will, ain't no may or may not, you will get handled a certain way. So I hate that dumb argument. That's how they think. They think, oh, we look alike. And that's why they emulate, right? And cosplay. They think, hey, no different. We look alike. No, dude, you being from New York or Miami is a tall tale, right? Is a flag for us. You not picking up the slang correctly, or you against reparations. So there's certain questions that we can ask you that can immediately add discernment to say, yeah, you're not one of us immediately.
They can't discern if you are African or if you're African American.
Who agrees with that?
At the end of the day, they are discriminating against you for your color.
You're going to have this massive influx.
Okay, so remember, he said they are discriminating against you for your color. I would like to ask, who is the they? You sound like Focus and IBM. Why IBM? Stop calling me, bro. There's nothing to talk about, man. Stop calling. I'm not answering your phone call. All right. So who is the they he's speaking about? Because when we say they or them, our pronouns go to somebody, right? Or something. Who is his they? I'm telling you, he is talking about those directly responsible, that one individual, right? That lone wolf. When we say they and them, we're not speaking about a lone wolf. We're talking about a 200-year-old system that's been set up to set the balance, set the scale, set the disadvantage balance to keep us at the bottom and white people at the top. So even that, we don't even agree on who the them and they are. As I said earlier, they're going to speak about personal experiences. We don't speak from personal experiences. We go beyond that. We talk about slavery. So keep in mind, when y'all hear these guys talk, they're going to always speak about a personal experience. These new blacks. That's not us. We speak about a historical experience of racism. Okay, so now keep in mind what he's saying. So the question was, do you believe you should be attached to affirmative action? So that was the question. He said the question was, affirmative action is historically supposed to be something for FBA does. Do you believe it should be extended to you as a new black who has no experience, who have no lineage to slavery?
Do Africans deserve to benefit off of affirmative action? Absolutely. Because I suffered too. Because I suffered too. Because I suffered too.
Okay, you see that? I suffer. When we say I, we're talking about our lineage. Okay, when we say I, we are speaking about our lineage. When he say I, he's literally speaking about himself.
I suffered too. Because I suffered too. Because I suffered too. They can't discern if you are African or if you're African American. At the end of the day, they are discriminating against you for your color.
You're going to have this massive influx of immigrants into the country. What we've allowed them to do, starting in 1970, is to wrap themselves in black folks' suffering and pretend somehow they suffered along with black folk.
Ain't that crazy, yo? That is now a prophecy. Okay, this speech is 2001. That Tether talking a minute ago, I suffered too, wrapping himself up in our suffering. That is like nowadays. That's like the 2020s. So what he said, that's crazy. Yo, this was, we could say Prophet Dr. Claude Anderson. Yo, the dude said it. Look, he said it, and the other guy admitted, and we're listening to Dr. Claude Anderson saying, just saying exactly what the dude ended up saying 20 years after this lecture. Just 20 years later, the dude said, I suffered too. And Dr. Clarendon said, these folks are going to come around you, come amongst you, and wrap themselves up in your suffering. That's crazy, yo. One more time. That's crazy. This is a prophecy that was fulfilled.
At the end of the day, they are discriminating against you for your color.
You're going to have this massive influx of immigrants into the country. What we've allowed them to do starting in 1970 is to wrap themselves in black folks' suffering and pretend somehow they suffered along with black folk.
I think it's important to understand that though as African American people, we are all presently black people in America. That is our current shared experience. That's what's happening now. So whether or not a person in a position of privilege is African or African American, that's still visibility, which is something that we need to fight for as black people.
Do Africans deserve to benefit off of?
Told you. They wrap themselves up in our suffering. All right, so now look at the dollar. Look at the dollar. Look at how the dollar is supposed to circulate in order for society to be successful. Here's my video.
This is a key question when evaluating the economic health and self-sustainability of a community. The concept you're referring to is known as the dollar circulation rate, or economic multiplier. How many times a dollar is spent and respent within a local community before it leaves to benefit outside businesses, corporations, or economies? Ideal dollar circulation in a community. What's considered good or affluent? Circulation time, meaning the circulation, ideal wealth building, strong local businesses, reinvestment, job creation, and economic independence. 6, healthy circulation. Some money leaks out, but a core economy remains. 3, at risk or stagnant. Money leaves quickly, low reinvestment, weak local infrastructure. 1 to 2 times. Economically failing, dependent. Money barely stays. Community relies on outsiders for goods, services, and jobs. Time-based circulation. Another way economists look at this is by how long a dollar stays in the community. Asian American communities, dollar circulates 20 to 30 days. Jewish communities, 19 to 21 days. White communities, 17 days. Hispanic communities, 6 to 7 days. Black American communities, historically, 6 hours or less.
That's crazy.
That means in many black communities, a dollar leaves the community within a few hours, going to outside corporations, non-black owned stores, banks, gas stations, or online retailers.
That's crazy.
Why circulation matters. Every time a dollar is spent at a local community-owned business, it multiplies. Jobs are created. Taxes are paid locally. Owners respend in the same area: food, childcare, housing. But when dollars go to outside-owned chains like Walmart, Amazon, or fast food franchises, they exit the community, don't support local infrastructure, don't fund schools or services in that neighborhood. Example, $1 spent, where you spend, circulates, how often, example outcome. Black-owned grocery, 3 to 4 times, owner buys from local farmer, hires locally, spends profits locally. National chain store, 1 to 2 times, money sent to corporate HQ, employees may not live locally. Online purchase, Amazon, 0 to 1 times, immediate money drained from the local area. Have summary, category circulation, health. Ideal, affluent, 12 plus times, builds generational wealth. Self-sustaining, 6 to 11 times, strong internal economy. At risk, 3 to 5 times, low reinvestment, fragile growth. Failing, 1 to 2 times, money quickly leaves, no infrastructure. Want this as a visual chart, animated breakdown, or video script to educate others? Just say the word.
That was interesting, right? Okay, I give you one jacket. Okay. Yeah, so that was very interesting, right? So listen to this. Like, yeah, the argument, don't worry, The argument is crazy. So once we were locked out of wealth for 100 years, and then they said, okay, after 1968, Jim Crow was officially illegal in all factors, right? So now they're like, okay, FBAs, go ahead and be successful, according to Myron Thomas Sowell and Candace Owens's and the Larry Elders. Okay, I'm saying the Coons and the Tethers. What? Okay, so when they say, okay, all right, guys, go ahead and be great. Nobody's holding you back. Go do you, boo. Wait a minute. We don't even have a dollar to circulate. One time. Not even for 6 hours. Remember, they said how long does the dollar circulate and how long does the dollar stay within your community? So they said it's supposed to be like it's supposed to stay in your community for about 21 days, and and at that time frame, the circulation has time to okay. When a dollar stays in your community for that long, almost a month, then that means it can reach its maximum, you know, uh, potentiality to circulate, right? Maximum ability to circulate. But if you don't even have a dollar, then there's no circulation, and it doesn't even stay in for six hours. Not even for 6 hours. Like there's no hours or minutes and seconds because you don't have a dollar to circulate. So think about that. Think about after uh, Jim Crow was officially okay. Yeah, when Jim Crow was officially illegal, we were left not even with $1 to circulate. So there was no circulation, no dollar circulation at all. All right. So now these are the honest discussions I try to have with these tethers that come over here. And unfortunately, most of the tethers that call in be Jamaican. So they're like they're giving Jamaica a bad name. Okay, that's why people like Tiger Creams out here cooking on them. To say, hey, they don't represent all of Jamaica. Yeah, what about black on black crime, Afro, peace? Did you hear about the Jamaican tethers in Canada regretting leaving their, hold on, let me read that, homeland? A lot of this sudden racism from the Cro-Magnon. Oh, wow. He said, never said so. Yeah, 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 yeah. And look, and that's another thing we got to talk about, Lord Maul. So I, again, it's hard to have these. Listen, guys, I would love to talk about Black Wall Street and these things with these tethers, but they do not like to talk about our greatness. They always want to talk about our current state collectively, like on the bottom of this. The GDP is low compared to every ethnic group, but they never want to talk about our greatness. So listen, man, all I can say is I can try to get these tethers back on the phone, American Dream or American Dream or Kwame back on the phone, or another tether who want to pull back up. I can try to get them back on the phone and have them have a discussion about our greatness. And I guarantee you they're going to deflect to something stupid, which undermining, disrespectful, and it's going to result in me either flipping or them or kicking them off. Like, so, but I'm going to go live a little later. I got to run to Walmart. I'm going to go live a little later. And for like, even like if Brass want to pull up. Yeah, so cause Chef, I think they invited me to their what they got going on, discussion about some random things. I said I'd go, I considered it, but like I have no idea what I'm stepping into. Like so no. All right, so the answer would be no for now. Until they could come over here and talk about it. Yeah, I'm good with the blind side blinded booby trap. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I got my own space. It's comfortable. It's peace over here. It's transparent. You guys know what I talk about. You know what the topics are. Yeah, I'm not. So yeah, Brass, dude, if you're not over here to talk about it, I'm good. I'm not going to nobody podcast who has not came over here and spoke with me first. Okay. I go to Chief X, I can go to Ngozi, because they come over here often. You dig? Other folks come over here. So I got no problem going over there. You know, it's called an even exchange. But I'm good. I'm good with that. I'm very transparent over here. You dig? And I created a peaceful space. So even when Kwame called in, bro, I never side blind, blind side Kwame. When American Dream calls in, he calls in after the show's going on. So he hears what we're talking about. Okay. Now, and when I had that coon Greg Phillip, that Pan-Africanist coon Greg Phillip call in, right? Which I told him I'm gonna make highlights of our discussion because he's a current UNIA member / more, and I had him admit that Garvey was a scammer. So, brother, listen, when I get a chance, I'm coming for you. I'm going to make a highlight video of me cooking you and you agreeing that Pan-Africanist shit was wrong. So I ain't forget about you. But even when I invited Greg Phillips over here, he knew we were talking about his organization, the Garvey Pan-Africanist shit. Yeah, so if nobody came over here and spoke to me first, I'm good. Like even Chaotic Truth. Chaotic Truth platforms are larger than everybody. Everybody's trying to invite me to their shit. Chaotic Truth platform is larger than theirs, and he has more live viewers. He got 250 and more. Like I've never seen him less than 250 live viewers. But guess what, folks? Chaotic Truth came over here first. Okay, so if he wanted to invite me to his podcast, I would go because he came over here first. And he's way larger than me. Okay, like my most largest live viewership was 270. He does that on average. So my largest live viewership is what he does on average, and he still came over here first. So if a tether could come over here first to have a discussion, he set the bar. So everybody now got to start over here or don't invite me. Real simple. I don't give a damn about it. The Chrome Magna. You didn't support reparations. They don't mean to. Wait, where is I don't see Pablo. Did I delete him? I don't see him. Or did he block me? uh did I block Pablo? I don't remember. Did I block Pablo? Hey, Pablo, I don't know if I blocked you or not, but y'all responded to him, but I don't see him in the chat. So either he blocked me or I blocked him. Yeah, tetherism. Remnant says tetherism is toxic and poisonous. Exactly. And it's worse because tetherism is a black version of white supremacy. Okay, so with that, folks, I'm gonna check out. I'll be back on. Maybe to continue with this or even cook on some math. I don't know. It might be back on this. It might be back on tethers because they are tethers and coons. Now we're introducing Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder because tethers are borrowing their talking points and getting cooked. So American Zestmeister. Yeah, that's American Dream. American Zestmeister. So chat, check me out a little later. Lord Maul says he commented unbiased Ron. FBA has more detrimental problem than worrying about so-called tethers roughly in see now, here's the thing. You know how white supremacists, when they call in Tariq Nasheed, they like to separate Jewish people from white supremacy. Okay, so tethers like Pablo, what they like to do is separate tetherism from white supremacy, and I do not let that fly. Okay, because everybody that speak against us, everybody is borrowing from white supremacist talking points. And I mentioned earlier, okay, scientific racism. Scientific racism was an error that basically birthed white supremacist talking points today. Now you got more modernized talking points, but they all stem from white supremacy, right? So all of these folks, all of them are team white supremacy. So Pablo, there's no way to separate you disgusting human beings from white supremacy because all of your talking points are rooted from the era of systemic racism or white or racist scientific racism is what I want to say. All y'all talking points stem from scientific racism. So there's no way to separate y'all. See, hey chat, people like Pablo, like these white Latinos, like they think this is about skin color. But it's not about skin color, right? Not about skin color. It's not about skin. So that's what they think. They think it's about skin color. So they're black, they're on our team, they're white, they're the ops. It's not skin color, man. It's about what side you're on. You got to choose a side. So if dark skinned people, brown skinned people, light skinned people choose the wrong side, that's team white supremacy. So it just really comes down to this. Are you team white supremacy or not? That's it. You choose that side, that's who you are. You represent team white supremacy. So dude, when I cook on these tethers and you filthy Hispanic tethers, when I cook on you guys, all of you are a branch of team white supremacy. Okay? So Mr. Broadway, let me add you, throw up axes in the building. Yeah, so all of you is team white supremacy. So it's not about skin color. It's about, are you team white supremacy or not? Because team white supremacy are our natural ops. So I just played Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell. They are team white supremacy. We don't care if the FBA. What side are you on? Are you team white supremacy? So they are team white supremacy. Tethers from the island or the continent Africa or South America or Guatemala, where the hell you from? The question is for you too. Are you team white supremacy or not? Okay, people from the Jewish lineage, same thing. The question is, are you team white supremacy or not? So it doesn't matter Egyptians and whoever else, Arabs, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. The question is still the same. Are you team white supremacy or not? And that's all we want to know. We don't care about your skin color. We don't care about what country you come from, what country you don't come from. Are you team white supremacy or not? Because if you're not team white supremacy, then you are a potential ally. If you're team white supremacy, you are an op. So, Mr. Broadway, I gave you a wrench. Subscribe. I'm be live a little later. I got to run to Walmart, get some groceries and some stuff. So everybody check back in and maybe, who knows, maybe like 1, 2 p.m. You dig? Kind of my son want to ride his bike, you know what I mean? So yeah, about 2, 3 p.m. in between, let's say in between 2 to 5 p.m. Tap back in. Everybody subscribe, like the video. I appreciate y'all, your dialect. I appreciate y'all chats in the chat box. The conversation keep going on. Pablo, I don't know if I blocked you or not because I can't read your comments, but if I did, I did it for a reason. So, or if you blocked me, you did it for a reason. So I think it's better. I cannot read your comments. It's less stress.